A country occupied. Cities all over the U.S. are now looking at being occupied, especially cities that are in states that are governed by Democratic governors. This is Straight from the Heart, and I am Kim Davis, your host. Today, myself and my co-host, Khalid Abdulqaadir will be talking about occupation in America. I've been around the military like all my life. I was born into the military. I saw my father in action in at least one war that I know of, but I know that he served in 3, World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam War. And I am almost afraid when we start talking about occupancy in our cities, in our communities. Now, I understand there's 2 sides to this, and I can get it. We do have a high crime rate in a lot of cities. I grew up in Kansas City, and the rate of murders and the violent crimes that are going on in Kansas City, it's a lot. And if you are especially, single women or a single man or just a person, a kid.
Yeah.
The ideal of violence in your neighborhood and community can be a lot. However, now I know I am talking to someone who has served in the U.S. military, and you have served in the intelligence area of the military.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your take on us having occupied cities.
Yeah, so you raised a good point. And the fact of the matter is that all major cities in America have crime.
Yeah.
Some more than others. I grew up in St. Louis. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, lower income. Violence was prevalent. On New Year's Eve, 4th of July, we had to sleep on the floor to avoid, being hit by stray bullets.
Okay.
A lot of my friends I grew up with aren't around anymore, either in prison or dead. And the first time I was ever shot at, I was about, I want to say 11 years old.
Wow.
In an alley playing basketball. Somebody pulled up at the end of the alley, started shooting down the alley. And there were several people, young people in that alley who were struck with bullets.
Yeah.
So, the violence is real. But when it comes to addressing violence, this is where the conversation starts to derail when we talk about the National Guard.
Yeah.
Okay. And to use maybe a distasteful analogy, but I'll give it anyway just to get the point across. It would be like if you had children who were incredibly misbehaved, and then your neighbor or somebody from outside your house just comes in there and then disciplines your children with physical discipline, whips them, spanks them, turns them upside down. And for sure, that day that those kids are being beaten and whipped and put in a corner, they are going to behave. There's a force that entered their zone that they're unfamiliar with, and that force is going to have the ability and the authority to cease all activity.
Okay.
Right? But when that force leaves, the activity is then going to regenerate.
Right.
And so that's a similar situation as to what we're seeing now, because you can send the National Guard in, and yeah, when there are men and women standing around the city with firearms, and you got trucks and bulletproof vests and things like that, people are gonna be less inclined to act out,
behave differently.
Right.
Yeah.
But what are the long-term solutions? And because there is no long-term conversation, in my mind, it points more to this activity being more of like a political theater, a show, than it does any serious intention to reduce gun violence. Because we do know that, for example, President Trump cut all the funding, the gun violence prevention funding from Biden was cut by Trump.
Okay.
So how do you cut that funding? Yeah, the prevention, the services, the things that were going to lead towards some of the long-term impacts. But then you send the National Guard in under the guise that your interest is to reduce violence.
Well, the interesting thing to me, and when we start talking about the National Guard are trained to be prepared for war. So I mean, and there's other things they go in, national disasters and things that they may have to step in on. But being part of the military, and National Guard are some of the first that are sent to the front lines when we go to war.
Yeah.
So, and I think about this because being a military brat and growing up around it, I had a father that his whole life was military, and you understand that the training is when you go into a war zone, because basically this is what the president has called these cities war zones. Mm-hmm. So as a military or service person in the military, when you go into a war zone, you put your mindset. Your mindset is everybody is suspect. I am to be keeping my eyes open for any unusual or what I could conceive as possible danger movement.
Right.
So what is going to happen, or what could possibly happen when you have the military in there and they are in these neighborhoods? Because granted, we do have cities that have real high violence, crime violence. Mm-hmm. What happens when they go in utilizing their training and it's overreaching is the word I'm going to use, and you are going into neighborhoods like you're going into combat? Because mind you, when you go into countries, you're going into neighborhoods that people live in. Mm-hmm. And you're fighting a war. What happens? What are they supposed to do when they come into our neighborhoods and occupy?
Well, you raise a good point, and I think the point you raise actually speaks to like this double standard of, what America is. You know what I mean? And, as I said earlier, I grew up in the inner city of St. Louis, but I was in a desegregation program. So I was bused to a predominantly white community to go to school. But those individuals from those predominantly white communities were never bused to my community to go to school.
Right. That's right.
But anyway, it was called the desegregation program in St. Louis. And to this day, I'm still friends with a lot of these people. And we have conversations about, race and things like that. And a lot of times I'll get a question like, why does everything have to be about race? And my response is because it is about race.
Yeah.
So when I would go out to these rural white areas to go to school, and I would spend the weekends with my friends and their families, and we would go to their grandparents' house or their uncle's house and so on and so forth. These individuals would be highly armed, right? Yeah. And all I would hear was this idea about, how they would basically have to protect themselves, their property, and so on and so forth from the government. You know what I mean? And the American thing to do is to uphold the Second Amendment, to ensure that tyrannical government can't come and impose itself and reduce your rights and so on and so forth. Right. Know your rights, Fourth Amendment, this kind of thing. And so what happens to, say, for example, a black father in the apartment building in Chicago where a Black Hawk helicopter came over the top and had men fast roping down onto the roof, and they took the building like a military operation.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, without any warning, because I believe it happened sometime between, I want to say 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. in the morning. This is when they hit the apartment building. what are these people supposed to do? Should they be the quintessential American? And, if you see men with guns invading your building, are you supposed to wait and see if it's the government?
Right.
So you could be a good, obeying citizen? Or are you supposed to be an American and defend your property and your home, with your life? And it brings me back to the example in 2014, the Bundy Ranch case, I believe it was in Arizona, where Mr. Bundy was, his cattle were grazing on federal property. Well, his cattle used to graze on this land that became federal property.
Yes.
And the federal government told him, hey, we own this now. So
move your cows.
Move your cows. He didn't do that. So the government ended up confiscating his animals. And in response to that situation, over 1,000 people showed up armed and had an armed standoff against the federal government.
Yeah.
Right. So is that the proper way to respond? Or are those types of responses only reserved for white people? Do you know what I mean?
We know that answer.
Yeah, and really that's what it is.
Yeah,
that kind of activity is only reserved for white Americans. And it's just plain and simple. And we can be as straight up about it as we want to.
Yeah.
That's why predominantly white people could invade the Capitol. That's why they could stand up in an armed opposition against the government, and those activities be considered patriotic. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I would say that, the black community should behave like their American cousins of Euro descent. And they should stand armed just like white Americans do. I mean, why can't white Americans do it, but black Americans can't?
Cannot. Yeah.
Yeah. And be called patriots.
Yeah.
Why do black people need to just comply?
Well, I mean, the thing is, we know this thing is even greater. We always call it systemic. It's the system. It's the system. The system cannot work without the people.
Yeah.
The people work the system. So it's not just the system, it's the people. But let's think about, it's the same concept across the board. A white American can go into a school and murder children, babies. They can go into a church and murder children. And they can go into a church, murder black people, or go into a business and murder innocent people. And they are looked at, we're going to look at their mental health. They were suffering of mental health. But in a community where poverty and oppression, lack of education, lack of health care, where people are put in survival mode, get into an altercation and someone is shot or killed, then that is a criminal.
It's bad decision making.
It's not even bad decision making. You're just a criminal. See, if a white kid do it, it's bad decision making. If we do it, we criminals. We were born criminals. We were, and so, I mean, I'm not saying any murder by any circumstance, and I want to make that clear that I am not justifying anybody for killing or taking someone else's life. What I am saying is the system that we are now up under, and city occupancy is just another step toward tyranny and dictatorship in America. It goes along with what's happening to our communications. First Amendment rights, the freedom of speech. It doesn't apply. What I'm talking about today may very well get censored if it gets in the wrong hands. And then, the rights to bear arms. I have to jump through Cheerios to bear arms, where white felons can get. I bet you the president is it's not going without arms. But I'm just saying, if you think about the things that America has allowed, and on top of which, I am appalled, and I'm going to say this again, I am appalled at the number of white leaders in America that don't even know the history of America and have the belief that they have the right to dictate or control or govern a country with the ideal that they were here first.
Yeah.
And I've heard this on occasions from white leadership in America. So when you start talking about, I have the right to bring in the National Guard, I have a right to tell, and this is the sad thing, there are National Guards that are just taking orders.
Mm-hmm.
But some of them are looking like, I'm going into my own community to occupy people I know. And it may not be someone I know personally, but when you know your people, wherever you go. And I'm going to go in, and not for the safety of the grandmother down the street or the young lady or the young man that's being bullied at school.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going there to put the fear of the military, not even the fear of God, in your community.
Yeah, Trump was asked by a reporter a few days ago that considering that there's been so many shootings at schools, would he consider sending National Guard units to schools across the country? And his response to that was basically, there's too many schools to do that. And if they did some kind of mechanism where they lock the doors automatically, it would actually lock the police out or something like that. Basically, he had all these reasons and these justifications of why the National Guard wouldn't be used to address a violent criminal act that's primarily perpetrated by white men.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, when I see what's going on today, I always imagine it from the idea of, what if this same type of energy, this same level of activity was used to eradicate racism in this country?
Okay, now.
Do you know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean.
What if a president got in there and said, I'm going to send a National Guard to Arkansas and find the KKK hub, and I'm going to eradicate racism in this country? It would be an identical situation, because as we know, regardless of what's trying to be said, predominantly European Americans lead in domestic terrorist acts of domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
And so, would it be within the rights of a president to say that in order to deal with this domestic threat, right? Because the president is saying Antifa is a domestic threat.
Yeah.
Okay, but white supremacy is who leads in domestic terrorism.
Yes.
So, it should be okay then for the next president to take that same approach towards dealing with racism. But here's the thing. If and when Democrats do take power, if they are not willing to move at the same level as what's currently being moved by this current administration, well, then it is really over.
Yeah.
Because at that point, what you're doing is, it's like having a steak in your hand and having a wolf bite at and eat the steak in your hand. And instead of you taking an action that's strong enough to stop this wolf from eating the steak in your hand and possibly eating your hand, you're just asking it to stop.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to work.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. So I would love to see, whoever, if the pendulum swings the other way and the Democrats get in there, I would love to see them move with the same sense of urgency for the things that they want to eradicate in this country, and then use the precedent that was set by this president as a justification for it.
Yeah. Well, and we talk about the pendulum swinging the other direction. The one thing that I notice, and maybe I'm hoping others are noticing too, there are 4 big things in this country that will lock us out: communication, the military, the Department of Treasury, and the Department of Justice.
Yep.
So for control of the military. So for control of the justice system, because we have a Supreme Court that is appointed to protect the law, who is now breaking the law and rewriting the Constitution. Communications is being bought up by the billionaires, which will give that control. The last thing that they have, and they're really working to get it, is the Department of Treasury. And if they get a hold of the money, and they're trying to work that through Wall Street.
Right.
The games that we're playing with the tariffs and all of that goes back to our economy and how it fluctuates. So America has not imagined this. And America, because we are, and I'm going to use this word lightly, and let me say this, a lot of the opinions of mine does not reflect the opinions or thoughts of the Heartland Black Chamber of Commerce. So I don't want people to say that the Heartland Black Chamber of Commerce believes in this. These are definitely the opinions and thoughts of Kim Randolph Davis alone. Now, maybe some people that agree, but when I see a takeover as such, and I'm a history studier and I'm a culture and world studier, so I like to study other cultures. And I spent some time studying North Korea and how their dictatorship works. Their dictator, they watch what he puts on television, if they are allowed to even have one. And at whatever time it is, he allows it. They work where he says they work.
Yep.
Their education is what the country allows them to learn. Their housing is set up according to the country. So everything is dictated by that. Now, that's an extreme dictatorship. There are other countries that are under similar, but they have a little bit more freedom, yet and still they are totally under the leadership of the president or whatever hierarchy that they call it, whether it's a king or a prime minister, whatever it is that they're calling them. So in America, we have had the freedoms that we sometimes as Black, well, all the times as Black America, we don't feel free. But we really haven't seen the extreme freedom. And I hear Black Americans say this all the time. Well, we're not the slaves we used to be. Well, you don't have to be the slave you used to be, because this is not going to, even though we're going to get hit first and the hardest, we're not the only ones that's going to get hit. And the sad part is white America, he doesn't care about you either.
No, he doesn't. Yeah. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine. As I mentioned earlier, I went through a desegregation program in high school. So I still have quite a few white friends that I grew up with, and white friend of mine. And we were talking about, what manifests from, the extremes of like Blackness and the extremes of whiteness. And when we have the extreme of Blackness, like the manifestation of the Black Power movement with the Black Panther Party and people like Fred Hampton and stuff like that, as a result of extreme blackness, we also end up with like the Rainbow Coalition.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Where Fred Hampton has poor white Southern Confederate blue collar workers coming to meet him in the city.
Yeah.
Because they're actually about to join his movement.
Right.
But when we have, in the case of extreme whiteness, then we get things like the KKK, we get the alt-rights movements, we get the neo-Nazism, we get things like that. And so I think that today, black people may feel a bit bewildered because we obviously know the history, but we kind of never seen it,
right?
You know, not from as high a level as it is today. You know what I mean? But if you look at American history, the way the country is being operated today is actually the norm for America. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So America went through a 6 to 7 decade flu called progressive liberalism. And what the country was before that remained. And now it's had opportunities to rear throughout that process with like Ronald Reagan and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the country had never really disavowed itself from what it always was. But in short, whether it's a Trump or Reagan or Kennedy or whoever, this country has always experienced a situation or a scenario where white men are able to single-handedly alter the reality of the country.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I saw this video that somebody was posting about Charlie Kirk, and he would famously ask this question to a lot of black students. He would say, what can you do that I can't do? And it would kind of stump a lot of black students, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, I would always think that one answer to that question is that white people in America have the ability to craft reality. Black people can't do that. Otherwise, show me an example of when that happened.
Yeah.
Because Martin Luther King Martin Luther King did not alter reality.
No.
Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
So give me an example of, and it has to be consistent. It can't be something that's
one time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we have the consistency of white America.
Yeah.
From George Washington all the way on. We have white men who are able to create reality. They can manifest reality. They can think of an idea and then cause millions of people in the country to have to then abide by those ideas.
Yeah.
And that is a privilege that black people have not enjoyed ever. And so now we're just in another situation where there's another white male creating the reality that they see fit, and we're just, experiencing it.
And that takes me to this status of white males and black males, or white people and black people. When we look at, someone asked me, was it last week? I want to say it was last week. Where are the black multi manufacturers or corporations? Like, where are the black? And I did tell him that, we do have the second richest black man in America lives in the world, actually lives in St. Louis, Missouri, and owns Worldwide Technology. And he's not a carpenter or construction man. He owns, the technology part of the World Wide Web, basically. And so, and he was in on the front end. So it's not like it's not there, but when you start thinking on the terms of, and they weren't thinking that large, they were thinking on the terms of like the Burns and Macs and the Black and Veatches and, the IBMs and, the Xeroxes, the tech companies, and also engineering firms, manufacturers like um, the GMs and the Fords.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a question that really kind of stumped me, because I'm thinking a lot of large corporations like to tote that they started with nothing and were able to amass this wealth,
Mm-hmm.
and become public traded companies. And why is it that we don't really have that in America? I even try to look around the world,
Yeah.
and it is almost strange.
It is. It's it's one of those remnants of the past that nobody wants to talk about. It's black people missed out on the great American experience, which was production,
Yeah.
enterprise,
Yeah.
capitalism.
Yeah.
And so, because there were so many years of exclusion, we just simply missed out. When World War One was going on, at that time, the military philosophy was that the people who we need to fight in wars had to be the best of the community. They had to be the vanguard.
Mm-hmm.
So they sent doctors, teachers, business owners, and all these, people like that, because they were like, we need the brightest, smartest people. And
yeah, the creme la la creme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they sent all these men to war, and they excluded a lot of black folks. And so it left a lot of black people at home. And so when all those men left their jobs and their businesses and everything like that, it created a vacuum. And so the white families, the wives and the kids and everybody else who was left behind, they would solicit business from the neighboring black towns. Mm-hmm. This is actually how Black Wall Street was able to thrive. Mm-hmm. I know people want to say that Black Wall Street was all self-sufficient, etc., but it was not. Black Wall Street benefited a lot from being able to do business with white customers who needed work done when the services were no longer available because all the men were away at war.
Right. Okay.
When World War One ended and these white men came home, they saw black people thriving. Mm. Right. And then from 1915 to the 1920s, in just 5 years, you then see all these black communities get burned to the ground. And this is when we get to the modern day rendition of racism. Because prior to World War One, the relationship between black and white people, it wasn't like it is today. Black people were out to themselves. They were Negroes with a hard R, and they were just out there doing their own thing.
Yeah.
They were not a threat. They were no competition.
Yeah.
But after World War One is when, white Americans realized that these people could actually compete against us. Yeah. Now, where I was going with this was, you have one timeline where if those businesses and those communities were allowed to stand, then today we would see a much larger representation of like the gentleman in St. Louis who runs a tech company. You'd see a lot more legacy black businesses, a lot more legacy black families, money in black communities and things like that. But when you burn those communities down, you then reset the clock on what these people are able to do. And then shortly after that, then you have desegregation, where then you bring them into your communities and then you discriminate against them in employment and housing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is the kind of history that, America doesn't want to look at. We don't want to reconcile, because more so than any other people in the world, because, when the Jewish community were viciously murdered during the Holocaust, the world, even though the world kept discriminating against them, ultimately they received a homeland. that they were able to build on. And then they got investment, things like that happen. After Japan was bombed into two inches,
Yep.
their cities were demolished.
Yep.
They received investments. And from 1945, when their economy was at a 90-degree incline after the atomic bomb was dropped, by 1947, they were at a 45-degree incline in manufacturing because investment was already coming back into the country to rebuild the country. And in 20 to 30 years after that, they became one of the biggest world-class economies on earth. You see the same thing in Germany. Germany was bombed to smithereens, but immediately recovered.
Right.
Right? The Japanese families in the United States who were put in concentration camps, every family was paid $1 million in reparations due to being put in concentration camps. Native Americans were given endowments and reservations, even though Native Americans also owned black slaves. The 5 civilized tribes owned black slaves. Yes. The only people who were told to bootstrap it, well, even let me go back, peasants from Europe were able to come over here and get free land.
Yes.
Okay. The only people who are told to bootstrap themselves and who receive no, it's not even sympathy. It's no recognition for their history or their experience are black people. You know what I mean? It's almost like we're robots or something.
Right.
And they're like, you guys don't feel pain. You guys don't suffer. It's just it's just because of y'all.
Yeah.
It's not because of your history.
Yeah. I just watched a documentary. This guy, and I think he's Indian, but he was from London and was able to go into the deep south, the deltas of Mississippi. And I know Mississippi because my grandmother on my mother's side, that's where her family is from. And they grew up in the Delta. Mm-hmm. So I know how racist it was and how bad it was. But this is modern day. Like they were even talking about Trump and the insurgency. This is how new this is. And it's on YouTube. But they were talking to Proud Boys. They talked to they talked to black people. They talked to Proud Boy. They talked to the KKK, which, sidebar, Proud Boys and KKK don't like each other. They don't even want you to affiliate them. KKK say the Proud Boys is some wannabes, and Proud Boys say we're not extreme like them. When we say make America great again, we want apple pie and baseball.
They still want to date Latinos and Hispanics.
That's it. But on this other side, but the thing is, when you talk about in this country, how black people, not only did you not, have you not reconciled or even recognized the atrocities that you brought people into the country from different tribes, different parts of the continent of Africa. It wasn't just, just different parts that came from different ports, different countries were kidnapping them and selling them. You had the Spaniards, so you don't know exactly what part of the continent they may have been snatched from, and you not only brought them in this country, took away their language, their culture, and because nothing was able to be passed down. So after surely after the second generation of slaves, there was no more culture that they could pass down because they weren't allowed to talk. Mm-hmm. And then they would separate them by language. So if you spoke Swahili but this tribe didn't speak Swahili and whatever, then they made sure they were together because they couldn't communicate.
Right.
So when you think about just the robbing, not of land and maybe your wares and goods, because I'm sure when they pilfered those villages, they had things of value. Not only did you take that, but then when you went back into their country, you took over their gold mines, their diamond mines, the resources that were over there, and still you have not acknowledged the atrocities. And now in modern day America, you are going into predominantly the Black communities and occupying to do another level of fear, the same type of things that you did, because that's your way of controlling this group of people.
Yeah.
You use fear when you brought them on this land. And now in 2025, we're going to go back to using fear to tame them, to quiet them, to get them out of the media, to get them from corporate America, to tear them down so they don't become manufacturers that own anything. All of this. And it just makes me wonder, do we realize how much fear we put into their hearts? Because when they see a group of people that can persevere and keep coming, we don't die, we multiply.
Mm-hmm.
And they see it keep coming. The fear of one day, Barack Obama opened a whole can of worms. Nobody ever thought that a Black man with an African descent would sit in the highest office in this country.
Yeah. That's what scared them. That's why we are where we are today.
And it was not just a partisan thing, because there's no way he should have had to fight as hard as he did when he
Hold on 1 second. He knocked that camera out. Okay, go ahead.
When he was sitting in that seat, and he had the office, the House, and the Senate.
Yeah.
And we had Democrats, white Democrats, that did not support him because he was a Black man.
Oh, yeah. There's a book, and I forget the author's name. The name of the book is Liberal White Supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm about to read that one.
Yeah, liberal white supremacy. And I try to tell people, people look at me and they just think that I'm some kind of ultra blue or whatever. No, I'm just pointing out white supremacy wherever it's at.
Wherever it's at.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where it is.
I have Republican friends, white Republican friends, who really, and two of them that I know are stepping away from the political scene because nobody is standing up to do what's right. Mm. Nobody is actually, now we might have different ideologies on how to do certain things, but to the point where you are causing total just total annihilations of communities and catastrophic, division in a country where we are supposed to be one, but we're not.
Yeah, the president of the United States on national TV, at Charlie Kirk's memorial service said that he hates his political opposition.
Well, and then also, this is what I see too, is the president of the United States, of these you hear United States, whoever, it's always been, ever since I was a kid, whoever won the political seats, whether it's governor, mayor, president, whoever sits in those seats are supposed to represent the United States of America and all of its citizens.
Yes.
But when you have a president that only represents himself, and then you have the merry men of the Republicans that follow behind him, because he's not even representing them for real.
Right.
Because at the first time that they disagree with him, he cuts them off.
Them too.
So you're really insignificant as soon as you stop being a yes lackey, then you're no longer significant or even liked. But to the point where you just straight out say, I don't represent them because they're Democrat. It was something that just happened the other day about because they're a Democrat. And he said it out of his own mouth. Yeah.
He said he's going to fire the federal employees that are going to be fired that are Democrats.
That are Democrats.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, and it makes this whole conversation about, his quest for peace in all these other countries, because he was trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize.
And they laughed, but
Yeah, but it's like you are not creating peace at home.
yeah,
And so, like, what does it matter
yeah,
if you're trying to produce all this peace and all over everywhere else in the world because you just want a trophy? But when it comes to your own countrymen, you would say on national TV that you hate them.
yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And he's not trying to, we all know he's not trying to create peace in other countries. He's trying to acquire land in other countries that he can control. So let's go there.
Yeah.
Hey, I know that we are about to end, or we're at the end of this episode, but don't go away, because our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into some other things that all of America is asking about. Like, where's Epstein? So again, I'm going to end today. I'm going to thank my production team, AGA Production. Hey, all I can do is give them hands up and a whoop whoop, because they are the team. And if you don't know who they are, keep watching, because you're going to look up and we are all going to be on the red carpet, and I'll say hi from there. Again, thank you for watching. Straight from the heart. We'll see you next time.